You know what's wild? Right now, there's talk circulating about every American potentially getting a $2,000 check in February 2026, and it's all tied to something called a tariff refund. Now, I've been breaking down money matters for over 3 decades, and when I first heard about this idea coming from Trump's economic team, I had to stop and really dig into what this means for your wallet, especially if you're living on Social Security and counting every dollar in retirement. Here's the deal. This isn't some random government giveaway. The concept is actually connected to the tariffs, those taxes on imported goods that have been collected over the past few years. The idea being floated is simple on the surface. Take a portion of that tariff revenue and send it directly back to American citizens as a refund check. Think of it like getting money back from the government instead of it just sitting in Washington's coffers. But before you start planning how to spend that $2,000, we need to talk about the reality of this proposal, how it would actually work, who qualifies, and most importantly, whether this is something you can count on or just political wishful thinking. Because when it comes to your financial security, hope is not a strategy. Now, look, I want you to sit down with me for a few minutes because this is one of those moments where we need to cut through all the noise and get down to the brass tacks of what's really happening here. I've been doing this long enough to know that when politicians start talking about sending checks to Americans, everybody's ears perk up, and rightfully so. But I also know that the devil is in the details, and those details are what separate a real financial opportunity from a pipe dream that leaves folks disappointed and still struggling to make ends meet. So let's talk about tariffs first, because if you don't understand what tariffs are, you can't possibly understand how this refund idea would work. A tariff is essentially a tax on goods that come into our country from other nations. When a company imports products from China, Mexico, or anywhere else, they pay a tariff to the U.S. government. Now, here's what most people don't realize. That cost doesn't just disappear. Companies pass that cost right down to you and me at the checkout counter. So, when you're buying a television, a pair of shoes, or even groceries that have imported ingredients, part of what you're paying includes those tariff costs. It's hidden in the price tag, but it's there and you're paying it whether you know it or not. Over the past several years, tariffs have generated billions of dollars in revenue for the federal government. We're talking about massive amounts of money flowing into the Treasury Department every single month. The Trump administration, both during his first term and now, as we're looking at proposals for potential future policy, has argued that these tariffs protect American jobs by making foreign goods more expensive, which theoretically encourages people to buy American-made products. That's the argument anyway. But here's the reality that I need you to understand. Those tariffs have also made things more expensive for American consumers, and that means your dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to. Now, the tariff refund idea is born out of this situation. The concept is straightforward in theory. The government has collected all this tariff revenue, and instead of using it for general government spending or letting it sit in various federal accounts, they would take a portion of it and distribute it directly to American citizens. Think of it as the government saying, hey, we collected this money that ultimately came out of your pocket through higher prices, so we're going to give some of it back to you. The number being thrown around is $2,000 per person, with February 2026 being mentioned as a potential distribution date. But here's where I need you to really pay attention because this is where most people get tripped up. This is not a done deal. This is not signed legislation. This is not something you can go to the bank and count on right now. What we're talking about is a proposal, an idea that's being discussed in political circles and among economic advisors. For this to actually happen, it would need to go through Congress. That means the House of Representatives would have to pass it, the Senate would have to pass it, and then the president would have to sign it into law. If you've been paying attention to how our government works over the past few years, you know that getting anything passed through Congress is about as easy as herding cats in a thunderstorm. Let me paint you a picture of how this would theoretically work if it did become reality. First, the Treasury Department would have to calculate how much tariff revenue has been collected and how much of it could realistically be distributed without causing other budgetary problems. Then they'd have to determine eligibility criteria. Would every American get a check, or would there be income limits? Would it be based on your tax return from the previous year? Would Social Security recipients automatically qualify, or would there be separate applications? These are massive logistical questions that don't have answers yet because the proposal hasn't been fleshed out into actual legislation. Now, if you're sitting there on a fixed income, living off Social Security, maybe a small pension, and you're thinking that $2,000 would be a game changer for you, I completely understand that $2,000 could pay off some credit card debt. It could cover several months of medication costs. It could fix that car that's been making funny noises. It could replenish an emergency fund that got depleted when the air conditioner died last summer. I get it. That money matters, especially when you're living on a budget that doesn't have any wiggle room. But this is exactly why I need you to approach this with clear eyes and not get your hopes up prematurely. The economic argument behind this proposal goes something like this. Americans have effectively paid higher prices because of tariffs. So returning some of that revenue directly to citizens would put money back in their pockets, which they would then spend in the economy, which would stimulate economic growth. It's a form of fiscal stimulus that doesn't require the government to go deeper into debt because the money has already been collected. On paper, it sounds pretty good. You're not printing new money or borrowing from China. You're just redistributing money that's already in government coffers. But let's talk about the counter-arguments, because there are some serious ones, and you need to hear them first. Critics would say that if tariffs are generating so much revenue that we can afford to send everyone $2,000 checks, maybe the tariffs are too high in the first place. Maybe instead of collecting the money and then sending it back, we should just lower the tariffs so prices come down at the store and people keep more of their money from the get-go. That's a legitimate economic argument. Second, there's the question of what happens to government programs if you take billions of dollars out of general revenue to fund these checks. Does something else get cut? Do we go deeper into debt? These are questions that responsible fiscal policy demands we ask. There's also the political reality we can't ignore. In an election cycle, proposals like this tend to get a lot of attention because they're popular. Who doesn't want a $2,000 check? But popularity doesn't equal feasibility. I've seen countless proposals over my career that sounded great in a campaign speech, but died quietly in committee because the numbers didn't work or because there wasn't enough political will to actually make it happen. I'm not saying this to be cynical. I'm saying this because I want you to be realistic about what you can count on and what you need to plan for. Let's talk specifically about Social Security recipients because that's who we're really focused on here. If this tariff refund did happen, it would likely be separate from your Social Security benefits. That means it wouldn't affect your monthly Social Security check, which is good. You wouldn't suddenly see your benefits reduced because you got a one-time payment. However, depending on how the legislation is written, it might be considered taxable income. Now, we don't know that for sure because the details don't exist yet, but it's something to be aware of. If you're already in a situation where you're managing your income carefully to stay under certain thresholds for things like Medicare premiums or other means-tested benefits, an extra $2,000 in reported income could potentially affect those calculations. Here's what I want you to do right now today, regardless of whether this tariff refund ever materializes. I want you to look at your financial situation and make decisions based on what you know for sure, not on what might happen. If you're struggling with debt, don't wait for a potential $2,000 check to start addressing it. If you don't have an emergency fund, start building one now with whatever you can manage, even if it's just $20 a week. If you're behind on bills, contact your creditors and work out payment plans. Don't put your financial life on hold, waiting for the government to send you money that may or may not come. At the same time, if this does happen, I want you to be smart about how you use it. $2,000 is a significant amount of money, but it's also a one-time payment. It's not recurring income. So if you get this check, the worst thing you could do is blow it on stuff that doesn't matter or use it to finance a lifestyle you can't sustain. If you've got high-interest debt, that money should go straight to paying it off. If you don't have any savings, that money should become the foundation of your emergency fund. If you're behind on necessary home repairs or medical procedures you've been putting off, that's what this money should address. The timing that's being discussed, February 2026, is interesting because it's far enough away that a lot can change between now and then. We'll have more economic data. We'll know more about how tariff policy is actually affecting the economy. We'll have a clearer picture of the federal budget situation. Congress will have had time to debate and potentially act on this proposal. So between now and then, stay informed but don't obsess over it. Check reliable news sources periodically to see if there's actual legislative movement, but don't let speculation and rumors drive you crazy or drive your financial decisions. I also want to address something that I know is on a lot of people's minds. There's a trust issue here, isn't there? A lot of folks feel like they've been promised things by politicians that never materialized. They feel like the system doesn't work for them, that it works for big corporations and wealthy people, but leaves regular Americans behind. I understand that frustration. I've heard it from millions of people over the years, but here's what I know to be true. Regardless of what the government does or doesn't do, you have more control over your financial future than you think. You can't control whether Congress passes a tariff refund. You can control whether you live on a budget. You can control whether you spend less than you make. You can control whether you stay out of debt or get out of debt. You can control whether you make wise choices with the resources you have. The danger with proposals like this is that they can create a mentality of waiting. People stop taking action on their own behalf because they're waiting for the government to solve their problems. And I'm telling you right now, that's a mistake that will cost you. The government is not going to fix your financial situation. A $2,000 check, if it comes, can help. It can give you a boost. It can accelerate progress you're already making. But it cannot and will not replace the discipline and intentionality that building financial security requires. You've got to take responsibility for your own financial life. And you've got to do it whether this check comes or not. So here's my final word on this whole thing. Stay informed, but stay grounded. Hope for the best, but plan for reality. If February 2026 rolls around and there's a $2,000 check with your name on it, fantastic. Use it wisely. But don't spend the next year waiting for it, counting on it, or making financial decisions based on the assumption that it's coming. Live your life, manage your money, and make decisions based on what you know for sure. That's how you build real financial security. That's how you sleep well at night. And that's how you ensure that whether the government sends you a check or not, you're going to be okay. Because at the end of the day, your financial peace doesn't depend on what Washington does. It depends on what you do for yourself. Thanks for watching Retirees Info. I'm Frank. We'll see you in the next video.